The stars above glittered like diamonds scattered across a black velvet sky as Captain Elias Carter stared out from the observation deck of the USS Vanguard, the flagship of humanity's fleet. He had seen many things in his career: wars, peace treaties, countless strange worlds, but nothing prepared him for this moment. Before him was the planet Ziara, home to the Ziari Empire, an ancient and technologically advanced alien civilization. The Ziari had never made contact with humanity before. They were mysterious, powerful, and held the fate of the galaxy in their hands. If they wanted, they could wipe out humanity without a second thought. But Elias wasn't worried. After all, he was one of the best diplomats humanity had to offer. For weeks, the fleet had been stationed at the edge of the Ziari system, waiting for their first official meeting. The Ziari were not known for diplomacy, and their communication style was cold and direct. But now, the message had come through. The Ziari Empress requests an audience with your leader. Elias stood in front of the large communication panel in the command center, adjusting his uniform and straightening his back. This would be the moment that would shape the future of humanity. There was a lot riding on this. A flicker of light on the screen signaled the arrival of the Ziari representative. Elias felt his pulse quicken as a regal face appeared, a woman whose presence seemed to fill the room with an almost tangible weight. Captain Elias Carter, the Ziari Empress said in a voice that was both powerful and calm, "I am Empress Zira of the Ziari Empire. Welcome to our world. We have long watched humanity from afar, and we find your species intriguing." "Thank you, Your Majesty," Elias replied, trying to maintain his composure. "Humanity is eager to learn from your people, and we hope this meeting can lead to peaceful relations." The Empress's eyes gleamed with a sharp, calculating look. "Peace is not a gift we give easily, Captain. It is something that must be earned." She paused before continuing. "However, there is one way for you to prove your worth." Elias's brow furrowed, sensing the change in tone. "What do you mean, Your Majesty?" The Empress leaned forward, and her next words felt like a thunderclap. "In exchange for peace, I offer you my daughter's hand in marriage." For a moment, Elias couldn't breathe. The words hung in the air, almost impossible to believe. Marriage. To a princess. And in exchange for peace. This wasn't a request. It was a command. You offer me your daughter." Elias stammered, shocked. "But surely there must be another way. A treaty, negotiations." "No," the Empress interrupted, her voice sharp. "This is the way of our people. Marriage is a bond that signifies strength and unity. If your species is worthy of such an alliance, you will take my daughter as your wife. Only then will we agree to peace." Elias felt the weight of her words settle over him like a heavy cloak. This was not a decision he could make lightly. A marriage between him and a Ziari princess would be more than just a personal commitment. It would be a political alliance, one that could either save or doom humanity. But what choice did he have? War with the Ziari Empire meant the end of humanity. The stakes were too high. He had to accept, no matter how strange and uncomfortable it felt. "I understand, Your Majesty," Elias said after a long pause, forcing himself to speak clearly. "I will accept your offer, for the sake of peace between our peoples." The Empress's lips curled into a thin smile. "Good. Then it is decided." Before Elias could respond, the transmission cut off, leaving him standing alone in the command center, his mind racing. A marriage. He was being forced into an arranged marriage to an alien princess. It was beyond anything he had ever imagined. And yet it was the only way to ensure humanity's survival. As the reality of the situation settled in, Elias's thoughts turned to the Ziari princess herself. Princess Silara, the name echoed in his mind. He had seen her portrait in the briefings, a stunning woman with striking silver eyes and long flowing hair. But what was she really like? Was she as powerful and commanding as her mother, the Empress? Elias shook his head, trying to focus. This was not about his personal feelings. It was about securing peace. But even as he told himself this, a sense of unease grew within him. What would the princess think of this arrangement? Would she accept it willingly? Or would she see him as just another pawn in her mother's game? There was only one way to find out, and that was to meet her face to face. And so, Elias prepared himself for the next stage of the mission, to meet the princess, the one he was now bound to, for better or worse. Elias Carter stepped off the transport ship, his boots touching the polished black stone of the Scifi Palace courtyard. The air was thick with an unfamiliar scent, something between burning metal and blooming flowers. The twin suns of Scifi cast long shadows over the towering spires of the palace, their golden light making the structure look like something out of a dream. But this was no dream. He was about to meet his future wife, Princess Scifi. Elias adjusted his uniform, making sure it was spotless. He knew he had to look strong and confident. The Scifi respected power, and he couldn't afford to show weakness. Not here, in their very heartland. A single mistake could ruin humanity's chance for peace. A group of Scifi warriors stood in a perfect formation, their deep blue armor gleaming. Their expressions were unreadable, their piercing silver eyes scanning him like he was an insect under a microscope. At their center stood a tall woman with sharp features and long, flowing silver hair. Princess Scifi. She was even more striking in person than in the images he had seen. There was an air of authority around her, an almost untouchable presence. Her armor was adorned with intricate silver patterns, a sign of her royal status. But the way she stood, arms crossed, lips pressed into a firm line, told Elias everything he needed to know. She was not happy about this marriage. Captain Elias Carter, Scifi spoke, her voice clear and strong. You are the human my mother has chosen for me. There was a sharpness in her words, almost like a blade testing the strength of its target. Elias met her gaze without hesitation. I am, he said firmly. And you are Princess Scifi. She studied him, eyes flickering with something. Curiosity, perhaps. Annoyance. Then she let out a small, humorless laugh. So this is the solution to war. A forced marriage. Elias could hear the frustration beneath her calm tone. He understood it. He wasn't thrilled about this arrangement either. But he also knew they had no choice. I wouldn't call it forced, Elias said carefully. It's a choice between war and peace. And I choose peace. Scifi's silver eyes narrowed. Peace. You think peace comes from an oath spoken in a grand hall. You think my people will suddenly accept humans because their princess wears a ring. Elias didn't flinch. I think peace comes from understanding. And sometimes, understanding starts with a single step, a single alliance. There was silence for a moment. Then, to his surprise, Scifi smirked. Clever words, Captain. But words are easy. Proving yourself is another matter. Before Elias could respond, a loud clang echoed through the courtyard. One of the Scifi warriors had thrown a ceremonial sword at his feet. Elias glanced at the weapon, then back at Scifi. What's this? A test, she said simply. You see, Captain Carter, in our culture, marriage is not just an agreement. It is a bond of strength. If you are to stand beside me, you must prove yourself worthy. Elias raised an eyebrow. Let me guess. A duel. Scifi's smirk widened slightly. You catch on quickly. The Scifi warriors stepped back, forming a circle around them. Another warrior, a towering Scifi male with dark blue skin and golden armor, stepped forward. His name was General Koreth, one of Scifi's finest warriors. Elias picked up the sword. It was heavier than he expected, the blade humming with energy. Do not worry, human, Koreth said with a grin. I will not kill you, but I will break you. Elias sighed. That's reassuring. Scifi watched closely as Elias took his stance. There was something about him, something different. Unlike the Scifi warriors, who moved with precision and training, Elias had a different energy, something unpredictable. The duel began. Korath lunged first, moving with lightning speed. His sword came down in a powerful arc, aiming for Elias's shoulder, but Elias sidestepped at the last second, twisting his body just enough to let the blade pass harmlessly. The Scifi warriors murmured in surprise. Elias countered, his movements quick and efficient. He wasn't as strong as Korath, but he was faster. He weaved through the attacks, dodging and striking when the moment was right. Then, in a sudden movement, Elias dropped low and swept Korath's legs out from under him. The general hit the ground hard, his sword clattering away. Silence filled the courtyard. Elias took a step back and tossed his sword aside, offering Korath a hand. "Still planning to break me?" he asked, his voice calm but confident. Korath stared at him, then let out a loud laugh. "You fight well, human. Unexpected." Silara, still watching, felt something stir inside her. This man, this human, had just defeated one of Scifi's strongest warriors, and he had done it without arrogance, without cruelty. Perhaps he was not as weak as she had thought. She stepped forward. "You have passed the test, Captain Carter." Elias turned to her. "Does this mean you accept the marriage?" Silara held his gaze for a long moment, then exhaled. "It means you have my respect. But whether this is a true alliance or just a political trap, only time will tell." Elias smirked. "Then I guess we'll have to find out together." And for the first time, Princess Silara did not completely hate that idea. The grand halls of the Scifi palace had never seen such an unusual gathering. The towering golden pillars shimmered under the glow of floating crystal orbs, casting a surreal light over the crowd. Rows of Scifi nobles stood in elegant robes of deep blue and silver, their expressions unreadable as they watched the event unfold. On the other side, a much smaller group of human representatives stood stiffly, clearly aware that they were deep in alien territory. At the center of it all stood Captain Elias Carter and Princess Silara, facing each other before the Scifi Empress. Elias adjusted his collar. His formal uniform was uncomfortable, but that wasn't the real problem. The real problem was the overwhelming hostility radiating from the Scifi nobles. Their silver eyes were filled with suspicion, some even with barely hidden disgust. They did not approve of this marriage, and judging by Silara's cold and distant expression, she wasn't exactly thrilled either. The Empress raised her hand, signaling for silence. The crowd fell quiet instantly. Her voice rang through the hall, strong and commanding. "Today marks a new chapter for both the Scifi Empire and humanity. Through this bond, we seek unity where there was once division. We seek peace where there was once conflict." Elias kept his expression neutral, but he could feel the tension in the air. Then the Empress turned her gaze toward him. "Captain Elias Carter, do you swear to stand by Princess Silara, to protect her, and to uphold the honor of this union?" Elias met her gaze and nodded. "I swear." She then turned to Silara. "Princess Silara, do you swear to accept this bond, to respect your partner, and to uphold the honor of this union?" There was a pause, a long pause. Silara's jaw tightened. Elias could tell that she was struggling with the words, but she wasn't someone who disobeyed orders, especially not her mother's. Finally, she spoke. "I swear." A soft murmur rippled through the crowd. The Empress nodded and gestured toward a Scifi official, who stepped forward with an intricately designed bracelet made of shimmering silver and embedded with small glowing stones. This was no ordinary jewelry. It was a Scifi bonding bracelet, a symbol of their sacred vows. Silara took the bracelet and, without hesitation, clasped it around Elias's wrist. It felt strangely warm, and for a brief moment, Elias swore he felt a pulse of energy from it. "It is done," the Empress declared. The moment those words left her lips, chaos erupted. A loud explosion shook the hall, followed by the sound of weapons being drawn. Elias's instincts kicked in immediately. He grabbed Silara and pulled her behind him, his eyes scanning the room for threats. Several masked figures had appeared on the balcony above, their blades glowing with red energy. Assassins. The Scifi nobles screamed as the attackers leaped down from the balcony, their blades slashing toward the royal family. But before any could reach the Empress, Silara moved. In a single fluid motion, she drew her own blade and blocked an incoming strike, twisting her body gracefully before driving her knee into the attacker's stomach. The assassin crumpled, but more took his place. Elias didn't hesitate. He grabbed a fallen warrior's pulse pistol, ducking as an attacker lunged at him. He fired 3 quick shots, hitting the enemy square in the chest. The figure collapsed, unmoving. The Scifi guards finally reacted, engaging the remaining assassins. The hall became a battlefield, energy weapons flashing, and the sounds of combat echoing through the grand chamber. Elias turned to Silara. "Are you hurt?" She glared at him. "I can take care of myself, human." "Clearly," Elias muttered, watching as she cut down another attacker with effortless precision. A movement caught his eye. One of the assassins was rushing toward the Empress, blade raised. There was no time to think. Elias charged forward, tackling the attacker just before he could reach the Empress. The two crashed to the ground, the assassin's blade narrowly missing Elias's throat. With a swift motion, Elias punched the attacker across the jaw, grabbed his weapon, and finished the fight. The last of the assassins fell. Silence filled the hall once more. The Scifi nobles looked stunned. This was supposed to be a wedding, not a battlefield. But what shocked them more than the attack was the humans' actions. Elias had saved their empress. Silara sheathed her blade and looked at Elias, this time with something different in her eyes. Respect. The empress, unshaken, stood tall. "It seems there are those who wish to oppose this alliance," she said coldly. "But they have failed." Her gaze flickered toward Elias, "and it seems our human groom has already proven his loyalty." The Scifi nobles murmured amongst themselves. This human was more than they had expected. Elias exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "So, does this mean the wedding is still valid?" Silara rolled her eyes. "Congratulations, husband. You survived your own wedding." Elias smirked. "That makes 2 of us." And for the first time, Silara actually smiled. The grand hall was still filled with the smell of burnt metal and energy blasts. Scifi guards moved swiftly, securing the area and checking for any more threats. The nobles, though shaken, were beginning to regain their composure. But the real focus of the room was now on Elias and Silara. Elias exhaled, lowering the stolen pulse pistol. His heart was still racing from the fight. He had expected challenges in this political marriage, but an assassination attempt at the wedding. That was a bit much. Silara stood beside him, her sword still gripped tightly in her hand. Her silver eyes scanned the hall, sharp and focused. She was angry, and Elias could guess why. Someone had tried to kill her family, tried to destroy this alliance before it even began. The Empress stepped forward, her expression unreadable. "Take the bodies away," she commanded the guards. "I want a full investigation. I want to know who is behind this." The guards bowed and immediately started moving. Elias turned to Silara. "Any idea who would want to stop this wedding?" Silara gave him a pointed look. "Take your pick. Half the noble houses see this marriage as an insult. Many of them think our empire shouldn't be making peace with humans." She crossed her arms. "Some of them believe we should be conquering you instead." Elias let out a low whistle. "Great. So I married into a family where half the people want me dead." Silara smirked, but there was no humor in it. "That's about right." The Empress turned her gaze to them. "Captain Carter, you fought well today. You saved my life. That will not be forgotten." Elias gave a small nod. "I did what anyone would do, Your Majesty." "No," the Empress said, stepping closer. "Not anyone. Many in this room would have let me die to seize power for themselves." Her silver eyes locked onto his. But you acted without hesitation. That is something rare. Silara watched the exchange carefully. Her mother was a calculating ruler. If she was giving Elias any kind of praise, that meant she was already thinking of ways to use him. The Empress turned to her daughter. You will take Captain Carter to your chambers. He is your husband now, and he will need to learn our ways quickly. Elias raised an eyebrow. Wait, what? Silara's expression darkened. You want me to babysit him? The Empress's eyes narrowed. You will train him. Teach him our customs, our laws, and how to survive here. Because, as of today, he is one of us. Elias sighed. Well, that sounds fun. Silara shot him a glare. Trust me, human, you won't enjoy it. A few hours later, Silara's quarters. Elias stepped into Silara's private chambers, and the first thing he noticed was how different it was from the rest of the palace. The room was minimalistic, with sleek metallic furniture, glowing blue panels along the walls, and a large window that showed a breathtaking view of Ziara's twin moons. Unlike the cold, rigid halls of the palace, this space actually felt personal. Silara removed her armor piece by piece, setting it on a nearby stand. She looked over her shoulder. Are you just going to stand there like a lost child? Elias smirked. Well, this is my first time in my wife's room. I'm just taking it all in. Silara rolled her eyes. Spare me the jokes, Carter. You're here because my mother ordered it, not because I want you here. Elias nodded. Fair enough. She turned to face him fully. Let's make something clear. This marriage, it's political. Nothing more. I don't expect you to act like a real husband, and I won't act like a real wife. Elias chuckled. That's a relief. I was worried you were about to start calling me darling. Silara narrowed her eyes. You're impossible. He shrugged. I try. She sighed and walked over to a panel on the wall, pressing a button. A holographic map of Ziara appeared, displaying different regions and key locations. You need to learn about my world if you want to survive here, she said, her tone all business now. There are people who hate you just for being human. If you make one wrong move, they'll use it as an excuse to get rid of you. Elias crossed his arms. And I'm guessing you don't care if that happens. Silara was silent for a moment. Then she shook her head. I don't know what I think yet, Carter, but I do know this. If you die, it will make my people see humans as weak. She stepped closer, looking him in the eyes. And I refuse to be bonded to a weak man. Elias felt the intensity in her words. He could tell she wasn't just being prideful. She had been raised in a culture where strength was everything. If he failed, it wouldn't just reflect badly on him. It would reflect badly on her. He smirked. Well, princess, I guess I'll just have to prove to you that humans aren't as weak as you think. Silara's lips curled slightly. We'll see. She turned back to the holographic display. Training starts tomorrow. Early. Elias groaned. Fantastic. I can't wait. Silara shot him a look. You'd better mean that, because if you fall behind, I won't slow down for you. Elias held her gaze. I wouldn't expect you to. For the first time since their meeting, there was a brief moment of understanding between them, a silent agreement that neither would back down from this challenge. And so, the uneasy partnership between a human captain and an alien princess truly began. The morning on Ziara was unlike anything Elias had experienced before. The sky was painted in deep shades of violet and gold, with twin suns casting long shadows across the towering crystal-like structures of the imperial city. The air was cool but carried a strange electric energy, almost as if the planet itself was alive. Elias stood in the center of a training courtyard, surrounded by Ziara warriors in dark, armored uniforms. They were all watching him, their expressions ranging from amusement to open hostility. Silara stood before him, dressed in light combat armor, her silver eyes unreadable. You claim that humans are not weak, she said, her voice carrying across the yard. "Today, you will prove it." Elias smirked, rolling his shoulders. "All right, what's the test?" Scifi gestured toward a tall Scifi warrior who stepped forward. The warrior was at least a foot taller than Elias, with a muscular frame and sharp, predatory eyes. He was clearly a seasoned fighter. "You will fight Ralvik," Scifi said. "Hand-to-hand combat. No weapons." Elias raised an eyebrow. "You sure you don't want me to start with someone smaller?" The watching warriors chuckled darkly. Ralvik smirked. "If you are afraid, human, you can walk away now." Elias exhaled. He had fought many battles before, but this was different. This wasn't about winning a war. This was about earning respect. He stepped forward. "Let's do this." The fight begins. Ralvik moved first, closing the distance between them shockingly fast. Elias barely had time to react before a heavy fist came flying toward his face. He ducked at the last second, feeling the rush of air as the strike missed him by inches. Elias retaliated with a quick jab to Ralvik's ribs, but it was like punching a wall. The Scifi warrior barely flinched before grabbing Elias's arm and throwing him across the courtyard. Elias hit the ground hard, rolling to absorb the impact. The crowd laughed. Scifi watched silently, her expression unreadable. Elias groaned and pushed himself up. "All right, that hurt." Ralvik smirked. "Is that all you've got?" Elias didn't answer. Instead, he took a different stance, one he had learned from years of military training. Speed over strength. Ralvik charged again, swinging another massive punch, but this time, Elias didn't try to block. He dodged, slipping to the side and landing a sharp elbow to Ralvik's jaw. Ralvik grunted, staggering slightly. The crowd's laughter died down. Elias didn't let up. He moved fast, using his smaller size to his advantage. He ducked under another attack and delivered a swift kick to Ralvik's knee, causing the warrior to stumble. The crowd murmured in surprise. Ralvik growled and threw a wild punch, but Elias saw it coming. He sidestepped, grabbed Ralvik's wrist, and used the warrior's own momentum to flip him over onto his back. The ground shook as Ralvik landed hard. Silence filled the courtyard. Elias stepped back, breathing heavily but still standing. He wiped some sweat from his brow and grinned. Had enough. Ralvik groaned and sat up, rubbing his jaw. He looked at Elias, then nodded. "You fight well. For a human." Elias smirked. "I'll take that as a compliment. A newfound respect." Scifi stepped forward, her arms crossed. "Not bad," she admitted. "I expected you to lose within the first 10 seconds. Elias shrugged. "Glad I could disappoint you." Scifi rolled her eyes but didn't argue. Instead, she turned to the watching warriors. "Let this be a lesson," she said loudly. "Humans are not to be underestimated." Some of the Scifi warriors exchanged uncertain glances, but none challenged her words. Ralvik stood up and extended his hand toward Elias. "You have my respect, Captain." Elias shook his hand firmly. "Likewise." The atmosphere in the courtyard had shifted. The hostility was still there, but there was now something else, a grudging respect. Elias had proved that he wasn't weak, and that meant something in Scifi culture. As the warriors dispersed, Scifi gestured for Elias to follow her. They walked through the palace corridors in silence until they reached a private balcony overlooking the city. Scifi leaned against the railing, watching the twin suns in the sky. "You did well today," she admitted. Elias smirked. "Careful, princess. If you keep complimenting me, I might start thinking you actually like me." Scifi shot him a sharp look, but there was a small smile playing at her lips. "Don't get ahead of yourself, Carter." Elias chuckled. "So what now? More training?" Scifi's expression darkened slightly. "There is more than just training ahead. Someone tried to kill us at our wedding. That means we still have enemies lurking in the shadows." Elias nodded. And we need to find out who they are before they try again. Silara's eyes met his. Exactly. For the first time, Elias saw something different in her gaze, not just duty, but determination. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about uncovering the truth, and they would face it together. The palace halls were silent, but the air was filled with tension. Elias and Silara walked side by side, their expressions serious. The assassination attempt at their wedding had changed everything. Now they had a new mission, finding out who was behind it before another attack happened. Silara led Elias through a dimly lit corridor, away from the main palace chambers. "We're meeting someone who might have information," she said in a low voice. Elias raised an eyebrow. "And who exactly is this person?" "A spy," Silara replied. "Someone I trust." Elias smirked. "Trusting a spy? That's bold." Silara shot him a look. "Do you have a better idea?" Elias held up his hands. "No complaints. Lead the way, princess." They reached a hidden door, which Silara opened with a quick sequence of hand movements on a panel. The door slid open silently, revealing a dark chamber lit by a single floating orb of light. Inside, a hooded figure waited, a hidden threat. Silara stepped forward. "Report," she ordered. The hooded figure nodded. "The attack at your wedding was orchestrated by someone inside the palace," he said in a hushed voice. Elias tensed. "An insider?" The spy nodded. "Yes, someone powerful. The assassins were only the tools. The real mastermind remains hidden." Silara clenched her fists. "Who?" The spy hesitated. "I do not have a name yet, but I have found something else. A secret meeting is happening tonight in the lower city. The traitor's allies will be there." Elias exchanged a glance with Silara. "Then we need to be there too." Silara nodded. "We'll go, and we'll find out who's behind this." The spy bowed and disappeared into the shadows. Elias crossed his arms. "Let me guess, we're going undercover." Silara smirked. "I hope you're good at acting, Captain, because tonight, you're no longer a human officer. You're a criminal." The lower city of Ziera was nothing like the palace. It was a chaotic mix of dark alleys, neon lights, and suspicious figures lurking in the shadows. The air smelled of oil, smoke, and something vaguely metallic. Elias adjusted the dark cloak Silara had given him. "I feel like I'm in a bad horror movie." Silara, now dressed in a more rugged outfit, smirked. "Try not to look too out of place, Carter." They moved through the crowded streets, blending in with merchants, travelers, and thieves. The meeting place was an old, abandoned building on the outskirts of the city. Silara stopped just before they entered. "We stay quiet. We listen. If things go wrong, we fight our way out," Elias finished. "Got it." She gave a small nod, then pushed open the heavy door. Inside, a group of figures in dark robes stood in a circle, their voices hushed. A hologram of a cloaked individual floated in the center of the room. "The human must not be allowed to remain in the Empire," the hologram was saying. "If this marriage continues, the Empress's influence will grow stronger, and we will lose our chance to control the throne." Elias felt his jaw tighten. So that was it. Someone wanted to overthrow the Empress. One of the robed figures spoke. "The next attack must be precise. We cannot afford another failure." Silara shifted slightly, her fingers twitching near the hidden blade at her waist. Elias leaned in, whispering, "I think we found our traitors." But before Silara could respond, one of the robed figures suddenly looked in their direction. "Who's there?" The escape. Elias and Silara moved fast. Before the traitors could react, Silara threw a small energy bomb onto the floor. A bright flash of light exploded through the room, blinding everyone for a second. Elias grabbed her arm. "Time to go." They ran through the door as shouts rang out behind them. Footsteps pounded on the stone floors as the traitors chased after them. "Down here." Scilara led Elias into a narrow alleyway, weaving through the twisting streets. Blaster fire zipped past them, hitting the walls. Elias turned, firing a stolen pulse pistol at their pursuers. I thought this was supposed to be a stealth mission. Scilara gritted her teeth. Plans change. They'd reached a dead end. Scilara looked up and saw a metal beam stretching across the buildings. Climb, she ordered. Elias groaned but grabbed the beam and pulled himself up. Scilara followed quickly. Just as the traders arrived below, they leaped onto the next rooftop. By the time the traders climbed up after them, Elias and Scilara had already vanished into the night. Back at the palace, Elias leaned against the wall, catching his breath. Well, that was fun. Scilara ignored his sarcasm, pacing the room. We still don't know who the leader is, but we know their goal. They'd want my mother dead. And they won't stop until they succeed. Elias nodded. Then we need to stop them first. Scilara looked at him for a long moment. You really aren't afraid, are you? Elias smirked. I faced worse. For the first time, Scilara allowed herself a small smile. Then maybe, she said softly, you really are strong enough to stand by my side. Elias raised an eyebrow. Is that a compliment? Scilara rolled her eyes. Don't get used to it. But in that moment, something had shifted between them. They were no longer just two strangers in a political marriage. They were partners in battle. And together, they would uncover the truth before it was too late. The grand halls of the Scifi palace were filled with an eerie silence. Elias and Scilara moved quickly, their eyes scanning every shadow. They had finally uncovered the truth. The assassination attempt at their wedding was part of a larger conspiracy to overthrow the Empress. And now, the time had come to stop it. Sciara's voice was calm but firm. The traitor is meeting with their allies in the council chamber. If we don't stop them now, my mother will be in danger. Elias nodded. Then let's end this. They approached the massive golden doors of the council chamber. Scilara placed her hand on the biometric scanner, and the doors slid open silently. Inside, a dozen council members were gathered, standing around a holographic table. At the head of the group stood Chancellor Varrock, one of the Empress's most trusted advisors. His dark robes and piercing blue eyes made him look both regal and dangerous. Varrock turned toward them, his expression unreadable. Ah, Princess Scilara, Captain Carter. I assume you are here to join us. Sciara's hand tightened around her hidden blade. No, we're here to stop you. The betrayal revealed. Varrock sighed and shook his head. You always were too loyal to your mother. But loyalty can be misplaced. Elias took a step forward, his hands resting on his weapons. You sent the assassins, didn't you? Varrock smirked, not personally. But yes, I arranged it. The Empress has ruled for too long. It is time for new leadership, one that understands that humans are a threat to the Scifi Empire. Sciara's eyes burned with rage. You're afraid. You think humans will weaken us. Varrock sneered. I think humans will change us. And change is dangerous. Elias chuckled. Wow, you plotted a whole coup just because you don't like humans. That's a lot of effort just to be a bigot. Varrock's eyes narrowed. This is bigger than you, Captain. The Empire cannot afford weakness. Sciara's voice was like steel. Then you should not have underestimated us. Varrock raised his hand, and in an instant, the council members drew their weapons. The fight begins. Elias moved first, grabbing a chair and hurling it at one of the traitors. It smashed into the warrior's chest, sending him crashing to the floor. Scilara lunged forward, her hidden blade flashing, as she disarmed another attacker with a swift strike. Blaster fire erupted in the chamber, the bright bolts illuminating the dark room. Elias dove behind a pillar, returning fire with precise shots. Scilara fought with grace and precision, moving like a storm through the chaos. She knocked down one enemy after another, her combat training proving far superior to the Council's traitors. Varrock, however, remained still, watching them with cold eyes. Then, with a swift motion, he pressed a hidden button on his wrist device. The entire room shook. A desperate gamble. Elias frowned. "Ah, what was that?" Silara's face paled. "He's activating the palace's defense droids." As soon as she spoke, the walls of the chamber opened, revealing towering robotic guards with glowing red eyes. Their arms transformed into blasters, aimed directly at Elias and Silara. Varrock smirked. "You were saying?" Elias cursed under his breath. "I really hate when bad guys have backup plans." The droids opened fire, and Elias grabbed Silara's hand, pulling her behind a massive stone pillar. The laser blasts burned through the air, narrowly missing them. Silara quickly accessed the control panel on her wrist. "I can override the palace systems, but I need time." Elias reloaded his weapon. "Then I'll buy you some." Holding the line, Elias rushed forward, firing precise shots at the droids. The blaster bolts struck their armor, but the machines barely flinched. One droid swung a massive arm at Elias. He barely dodged in time, rolling across the floor and firing a shot directly into the droid's optical sensor. The machine sparked and collapsed. Silara worked fast, her fingers flying over the holographic screen on her wrist. Almost there. Just a few more seconds. The remaining droids closed in, their blasters charging up for a powerful attack. Elias gritted his teeth. "No pressure, princess." Then, a beep. Silara slammed her palm against her wrist device. Instantly, the droids froze in place. Varrock's eyes widened. "No." Silara turned to Elias. "Now." Without hesitation, Elias aimed his blaster at Varrock's control device and shot it clean off his wrist. The device exploded, sending Varrock staggering backward. Silara advanced on him, her blade at his throat. "It's over," she said coldly. Varrock's confidence finally crumbled. "You don't understand," he hissed. "This empire." Silara cut him off. "This empire belongs to the people, not to you." Elias smirked. "And if you think humans are weak, maybe you should rethink that after today. Justice and a new future." Minutes later, the palace guards arrived, arresting the traitors. The coup had failed. The Empress was safe. Varrock was dragged away, his once powerful influence reduced to nothing. Elias and Silara stood side by side, breathing heavily. "You were amazing back there," Elias said. Silara glanced at him. "You weren't too bad yourself, Captain." He chuckled. "So, does this mean you trust me now?" She studied him for a long moment, then finally smiled. "Yes, Elias. I trust you." Elias grinned. "Well, that's a first." Silara rolled her eyes but didn't argue. They had started as strangers forced into marriage, but now they were something more. They were allies, partners, and maybe, just maybe, something even greater.